Today I'm making a pattern from the Green Bean Baby set, which is by Empty Hanger Patterns, and I bought it on Etsy. And there's a whole bunch of different patterns that you can make using this pattern, but I want to make a cardigan and that's not on here, so I'm going to show you how I do that. The closest design that I have on here is O, which is a onesie with snaps all the way down and it goes into trousers or pants. With snaps, so we're going to put buttons on ours instead, or you could use snaps, I guess. So what we're going to do is go over to our pattern, put some tracing paper over the top, and we're going to trace the O line. So these patterns are all the lines are marked on there, and then we're going to stop at Z, which is the shirt length. So I'm just going to trace that piece out, and we'll go from there. We have one more piece to trace, and that is the facing for the placket down the front. So I have put this underneath my tracing paper because I'm going to trace it. It's a little bit different shape. What's important here is the width of it, and the actual length of it is just going to be a straight rectangle, but it needs to measure the same as from the top of the center front here all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to just extend these lines out just softly so I can see where that needs to end, and then I'm going to draw these two lines in, and that will be our facing piece. Now that's traced out, there are two other pattern pieces you need. You need the sleeve piece, and I'm using the long version of the sleeve here. You can just trace that out as well if you'd like, but don't forget the notch when you're doing that. And also the neckband HKO, because we are making essentially O. So we're going to cut that piece out as well. So you have 4 pattern pieces. You will need 2 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, and 1 of these. So that is 2, 4, 6, 7 pieces of fabric to cut out. In addition to those pieces, don't forget you need to cut 1 back piece as well. Make sure you interface your facing pieces with a knit interfacing, and then you're going to position those on both sides, right sides together, and then sew down these edges. So these are now sewn on, and the facings, the seam allowances are pressed towards the facings. There's some other parts in the pattern about clipping seams and stuff, but we don't need to worry about that for this particular variation. Our next step is to sew these shoulders on the front to the shoulders at the back. Our next step is the neckband. So these have now been pressed. This neckband was folded in half, wrong sides together, and pressed as well. And I actually had to adjust the pattern for the smallest size in here by adding an extra 1.5 inches because I just wouldn't be able to get enough stretch from this fabric. So this is an 1.5 inches longer than the pattern piece. And what I'm going to do is start stitching it from the edge, but the actual neckband doesn't start until the right where the facing is. So you stitch along here and then you work your way around, making it fit as you go, and then finish stitching across there as well. So there will be stitching here but no extra neckband. So the neckband is on, and most of the way around I've actually pressed it down the seam just to reduce the amount of bulk up here. And I've also finished the edge of the facing here because we didn't do that in a previous step, and I think it'll be useful. You can do this on a serger with a zigzag stitch. I just used the overlock stitch on my sewing machine for this one. So the next thing we're going to do is fold this back so that the facing and the main body are right sides together. And then you're going to sew along your existing stitches and then follow your neckband all the way around and do the same at the other side. This is what it looks like once you've done that. So I actually chose to use my stitching as like a top stitch to keep that seam allowance down. So when I went across there, and I also chose to baste the bottom as well so that it's nice and easy when I turn it back and turn that facing to the inside. You can kind of see what that looks like. And then you're going to press that seam that's just there, and then you've got a nice finished edge along here. I added an extra row of top stitching just along the top of the collar there, just to help make these points lie flat because of the way that I'd stitched this. Then I undid the basting stitches at the bottom just so that that's nice and flat now that I've pressed this here, so that will make hemming it easier when we get to that point. Then the next thing you want to do is get the sleeve and then follow the pattern instructions on this. I've hemmed it under, so it's folded once and then folded again, and so those are finished. And then we're going to use the pattern to sew the sleeve into here. So you see where the front and the back join, we've got the seam that's going to join up to where the notch is. We're going to right side together, and then we're going to sew it into these armholes here, and you're going to do that for both sides. Now I've set these sleeves in and pressed them so that the seams are towards the body. It's now time to finish the side seam. So what we do is we're going to take the back, we'll put it over the front, which I've just pinned closed, because we'll add some buttonholes to that shortly. Bring that down, and then at each side you're going to sew the side seam closed, matching those seam points, and then down the sides as well. And you can do that for both sides. Now these seams are done, we're going to press them, and then all you need to do for the next stage is to hem the bottom. So that's going to be done exactly the same as the sleeves. You're going to turn up a little bit and then turn it again, just so you haven't got any of the raw edges. Now it's hemmed, we just need to add the buttons. So decide how many you want. I actually want to put 5 on mine, and I have this little expanding gauge so I can make sure that they're evenly spaced, but you could use a ruler. Make sure your buttons are no larger than 1/2 inch, and if you're making a girl's cardigan, they go on the left hand side. The buttons go on the left and the buttonholes go on the right, and on a boy's cardigan they go the other way around, so you'd put buttons down the right hand side and the buttonholes on the left hand side. So here's my finished cardigan. I have a really cheap machine for making buttonholes and zigzags and that kind of thing. My main machine's just a straight stitch machine, and so it really struggled with the buttonholes, and I ended up having to just kind of make my own using the zigzag stitch. So it's a little bit messy, it's not as great as I would like, but this is what it looks like completed, and maybe one day I'll get to buy myself a better machine.